Okay. Well, thanks, Robby, for joining us. I'm looking forward to you discussing how, you're actually you're brilliant, and I'm looking forward to hearing how we can improve our life through radiant. I want to say it just really. I'm going to say radio frequency and the radio frequency spectrum, but more specifically as it pertains to us healing as humans, but also those with breast implant illness. And I personally know the benefits or have felt the benefits. I'm going to learn today with you the knowledge behind using a sauna for our healing purposes.
Great. Well, thank you for having me to be part of this. It brings me great joy to have the opportunity to touch your community because they're well underserved and not recognized, and it actually makes me sad to think that there are people out there that are challenged with health challenges, and when they go to try to figure out what's going on, they're told by practitioners, you're crazy, go see a psychiatrist, there's nothing wrong with you, your blood tests seem to be okay. Like just all of this language that's everything apart from you feeling well and fully integrated and vital. And that's how we're supposed to be. That's how nature intended us to be. So let me introduce myself. I'm Robby Besner. I'm the Chief Science Officer and the co-founder of a company called Therasage. We're very philanthropic based. We are physically located in South Florida, and we also have locations in the middle of the country in Michigan, where we have an organic permaculture project that we started about 5 years ago. And we also have a fulfillment company and the place where we assemble all of our devices, that's located in California, in Southern California. So with that, we specialize. I have a background in engineering, health sciences. I was on an allopathic track, got to Case Western Reserve, and that was 35 years ago plus, and it wasn't quite my thing. Those days we didn't use the words, it didn't resonate for me, but these days we do say that. So anyway, I told my parents I was taking a leave of absence when I knew that it really wasn't right for me. And little did I know that all the skill sets I learned on my way to medical school were everything that I'm using today to create many of the medical devices. And all of the things that we're going to talk about are documented by science and assays, and as well as the internal clinical trials and things that we do with our own equipment. It's also well documented in terms of, if you were to look at the New England School of Engineering and Science, if you look at any of those, any of the journals, the science that goes beyond or goes into full spectrum infrared frequencies, sun thermals, is well documented. It's more than 100 years old, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Everything we do here, because basically in the beginning, our model, our business model, was to basically teach and train doctors how to use our medical devices, integrate them in their practices, pair them up with whatever protocols they're doing to improve the efficacy of what they're trying to do to help the patient get back on their feet. And so we were very oriented towards the medical community. It wasn't really until the last 8 years that we've gone more towards also working directly with the public. And so now we're working with both the medical side and the direct to the public approach. And it's been really a joy. I think that the circumstances with the pandemic and people's concerns about, their health certainly have escalated and dialed up during the times when we were somewhat secluded or fragmented in terms of communities. People had a lot of time to think about their health, and certainly take more commitment to owning their health challenges, and also looking for solutions that they can to manage their health, rather than kind of diving right into that, big pharma, the medical model, all that stuff getting caught into that little daisy chain. Now people are getting empowered, and that part I think is really wonderful. And it speaks volumes to you and what you're doing in your project, Dr. Danielle and Terry, but certainly to the community that's stepping up and really embracing what's going on for them and not taking no for an answer and are seeking out real solutions. And I hope today's presentation will actually bring a lot of that community and you all a lot closer to understanding that there are affordable, real answers that can really create what I call a primal healing platform. And that's where I developed this particular presentation that I'll breeze through, and I'm hoping that it'll raise some questions among you all, and then you can bring them out, and then we can address those, as well as questions that maybe some of your community will have after they see this, and or the answer to the questions, that you're bringing to me are the ones that they're going to have. So that's basically where we're going to go with it. Is that okay with you?
Oh, it's great. There's so much to say about the photobiomodulation, right? And
Yes.
from even just whatever the spectrum, and from red light, lasers, cold, hot, all of that. Like, we've been using this in Western medicine for quite some time, but really we've been living it. Our ancestors, even waking with the sun, sleeping with sunset, that kind of thing. And I hope you touch into all of this, so it does get back to our, I think you said it, like primal nature. And if we can get in that groove, it definitely helps add value to so many of our systems, circadian rhythms, our detoxification. And I'm just gonna let you take it from here because I can't wait.
Well, no, all that stuff is so important because in today's world, we have what's called this reductionism. In the allopathic approach, many doctors just want to isolate, look for that root cause, identify that one little micro system that might be off and just supplement that somehow and trying to get Humpty Dumpty back together again. What we've seen over the last 25 years in our clinical approaches is that if you treat the body completely, the whole, understanding that there are many systems that are interacting with one another, then and you can create what I call my primal healing platform, where we have all of your systems working in somewhat of in harmony in a way, and there you're not fighting nature, you're kind of using nature and the genetics that you're born with to create that vital force inside of you, and really what I call true health, or true good health, or vital health. And so many of the things I'm going to reference here are going to be more of a holistic, integrated, functional approach rather than that reduction type of situation, even though many of the components stand on their own 2 feet in terms of how important they are. And remember, my perspective is energy medicine. I'm sort of a little expert in my area, said humbly. We've been doing this for more than 20 years. Our company started or was birthed from my oldest child, my daughter, in her early teens, contracted Lyme disease. And when she got sick, I kind of retired myself from what I was doing and became her personal nurse and somewhat in-house doctor. We realized, as many people, and I'm sure you see this in your practice, your patient comes to see you, but 99.9% of the time, they're managing their healthcare by themselves and or within the family support they have. It's not the practitioner certainly gives the protocol and sets the stage, but really in order for it to work right, there has to be somewhat of an ownership and responsibility, and so we very much, I saw that dynamic. And now remember, 25 years ago, Lyme wasn't quite as advanced as it is now in terms of its research and so forth. And so we were kind of almost flying the plane without any instruments then. We, as a family, we had means, and we found what still is considered the top Lyme literate doctor in the world to work with my daughter. But then I also recognized it wasn't enough just to see him and get his protocol. And they didn't have telemedicine then. We had a corresponding team of doctors here, a neurologist, a pain doctor, a general practitioner, and they all had to coordinate things, and it was a little bit complicated. Now it's made much easier, and I'm very helpful. I'm very hopeful that the new virtual world really gives more people access to more information that can really get them to in a place where they find themselves with the right practitioners doing the right things that are supporting whatever their journeys are.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of and I think that's part of today, is really just putting it out there so people understand that there are affordable devices and things that you can do on your own, in your own home, not in clinic, not in hospital, that will support your whole health journey, not just the small aspect or the hiccup that you're having now in your general health, but really create a more vital program. And what I see to be even more paramount is that you'll teach this to your children, like it's more of an embracing of a lifestyle, and than it is just dealing with an isolated health challenge that you might have particularly. But okay, so I have a tendency to be verbose, so you guys have to reel me in, and we're just going to kind of go through this little program. So so this was a quote that I took from a really dear friend of mine. His name is Dr. Nathan Bryan, and he's probably one of the he's the protege of the doctor that discovered and won the Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide. And so Dr. Bryan and I now are 7 or 8 year friends. He wrote a bunch of books. He owns 21 patents on formulations that he's done from his research. And I love his work because it works so well with mine. One of the things that infrared frequencies does is it produces a transient gas that's called nitric oxide naturally. As we get older, one of the reasons why we age is because of our body's ability. We make less nitric oxide, which means our blood's ability to hold and store oxygen starts to diminish. Another word in more modern term would be oxidative stress. And it's a big reason why we age. But oxidative stress also comes into play in other ways, because when you have an imbalanced terrain, many of the microorganisms that live in harmony in our bodies, more than 60,000 in our GI tract, they're anaerobic in nature. And so when you don't have enough oxygen in your blood, then oftentimes there can become an imbalance in your terrain and your microbiome, which causes many health challenges along the way. And they often say that your gut is basically 80% of your immune system is all warehoused in your GI tract. And so oxygen, nitric oxide is an important piece, but just his quote, the body's either, these are the reasons why you are sick or you get sick. It's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that's toxic. And obviously your community has a challenge with implants and leaking of materials that are exogenous to the body. They're not natural. And so how does the body manage that? And so one is there could be universal ways the body manages, and then it could be individual based on that individual's particular genetic makeup. So I think that both need to be considered, but certainly from my perspective, we're not discerning. We just know that we're living in a very toxic world now, both internal environments and external. And in our part, what I discovered, and I did this basically on my journey to help my daughter, she expressed herself in 3 different ways. She had cognitive challenges, she had what I considered high levels of inflammation and toxicity, and she had body pain. And so when I unpacked those symptoms, somehow I focused on toxicity. I started looking at the most modern methods, both invasive and non-invasive ways to detoxify. That's when I discovered that there are frequencies of sun energy that actually mobilize all the toxins in your body. So that's a pretty big statement. This was 25 years ago. And when I discovered that, I then looked around and started to see what devices were available for an individual to buy, or even that doctors were using. And at that point, full spectrum and infrared frequencies were being used by sports medicine doctors to help players that were injured lower their pain thresholds and also recover from injuries quicker to get back on the field. So I said, that's really interesting to me. There's probably something more to this. So there weren't very many devices available, or there weren't any available for the main public. So what I did was I organized a trip to go to Asia. I spent almost 3 months. I interviewed more than 60 different factories. And I found 3, and I then locked onto one, and I started developing devices for our family use, because I believed, or I'll mention this from time to time, I get downloads, which is basically messages from above, those little voices. And it directed me towards understanding that sun and nature's ability and the balancing that goes on. I mean, the toxic environment now is very unusual. It's probably the most toxic we've in the history of the world, but having a toxic environment, or having the body self-regulate a toxic environment, isn't something new. What's new is the components of the toxicants in the world these days, and the intensity or the concentration of these toxicants that are so overwhelming that we can't recover quick enough, not by ourselves. And certainly not, and I really want to identify this in the urban settings versus rural settings, because you have half a chance if you're in a rural setting where you may not be as exposed to 5G and exogenous frequencies, for one thing. And maybe the concentration of certain things like aluminum in the air and chemtrails and so forth may be less concentrated in Bali than they are in LA, Los Angeles, So these are all little factors. So geographics have a little bit to do with it. But we discovered that you can basically mobilize your toxins using light frequencies. So just going to kind of gloss through the slides, and then we're going to come back to things as you guys feel it's important. Okay. So here's the world. What's broken about it? And when you look at the world like, I'm going to fix the world, that's sort of overwhelming, and that could someone that's health challenged could start off with be defeated even before they start if they think that they're going to fix the world. So I'd rather kind of work with what we can fix rather than the things that are too big, because if I can teach someone here, just one person, how they can help fix themselves or get them on that path, then by fixing themselves, they fix their family, they fix their community, and it starts to drift out to the world eventually, if we can get people on that track. And so the things that I think that we do have under our control are that we can work with are emotional challenges, and that's a big part of general health, as well as the way that we're genetically expressing these days. So we all have genetics, but then we have the choices that we make in our life and how that affects our genetics, which is called epigenetics. Okay. And so I think that we can shift our epigenetics, and I think that we can work on our emotional health. And I think together with working on both of those, we bring ourselves back to a more vital person and a more, and set ourselves up to have a more a primal healing platform.
Absolutely. And even, I mean, like I just think of when I had BII, and I think of how I don't even really know the words to categorize my emotions at that time. And if there was we will have a couple of people talk about emotions and depression and a whole bunch of things here. But if your emotions can change or trigger or have you express your DNA in a certain way. So if we can understand ourselves and ground ourselves in many different ways, right? Like, I think that that has been my foundation to become, what I consider whole.
Right. And we've already seen this in clinic, and maybe people out there can appreciate There's oftentimes where you have a chronic ailment and you do some protocol and then you go into remission and you're doing great. And your thoughts then is like, wow, I got this under control. And then maybe a few years later, you have another episode and you relapse. And what we've found is that the reason, probably the number one reason why there are recurring challenges with chronic ailments is because the emotional part of their health challenge is not being addressed. And once they address the emotional piece, then they heal completely. And then it's a history lesson, their challenges. So I can't emphasize enough how important emotional healing is in our DNA, in the way we express ourselves, and supporting health, you know? So that's my piece on that. And the challenge there is, as it is, many doctors don't know enough about emotional healing. But I do recommend, and there are, you know, like the Louise Hayes Foundation is a big one to go to. We were very close to that foundation. She's passed, but we were working with them indirectly through a direct practitioner relationship through the stuff that we make and the things we do. And the coaching about, it's not just enough to make a good device, Danielle, you have to actually know how to use it to get the benefit. So we're kind of big on that part. Anyway, so what Louise Hayes did was she drew a direct correlation between the way you're expressing yourself with the emotional piece that's tied to that. And so if you look at any of her books and you just say, wow, I get migraines, what could be the emotional piece that's tied to migraines? And so it's so easy and user friendly because you know how your body's expressing yourself. And so then you can kind of look at maybe what are some of the emotional pieces that are tied to that and then unravel those. And what I will tell you, and this is just from my own personal experience, that with all the healing I've ever done with my healing, with my clinic, with my family and all that, the emotional healing piece is the one that your body responds to the quickest. I mean, once you find the emotional block and you can unblock that, it's almost like someone turned the light on in the room. That's how amazing you feel. So that's enough on that one. Okay, so we talked about the systematic approach versus the reductionism or compartmentalism, and we're more systematically oriented. And then goes back to the epigenetics that I just mentioned, that the things we can control somewhat is the filtering of the air and the water and making sure we're exposed to the right sunlight, the eating, foods that are not genetically modified and are more natural, more organic. And then, of course, the exogenous frequencies, which is EMF or ELF, which is extreme low frequencies. And that's another word for dirty electricity, but these frequencies do influence the microbes and also are another stressor, as we're finding. So you start adding up the stressors and eventually your body is overwhelmed. And
I think if you're immunocompromised or in a hyperimmune state or a hypervigilant state, these impact you even more. Like it's an exponential impact, right? As I'm healing, like I still may do the things, but I don't have to do all the things all the time. It's quite intriguing that when your cells are low ebb, which I think you would call that maybe in a frequency term, I'm sure, right? That like there's different frequencies that can affect a less robust cell, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, I don't have all the lingo, but I can feel it.
No, you got it. Your thumb is on it, and I appreciate that. And I'm always searching for the microscopic reasons why the stuff that we do works so well. I'm happy with that. I'm completely comfortable with knowing that it works so well.
Yeah.
But I'm happily surprised when I meet some brilliant bioscientists that says, wow, did you know that your stuff does this? We tested it. And I'm going, oh my God, and I'm going to recount some of that stuff through this presentation because I've been very fortunate to meet some of the greatest minds in healthcare in the world. And just in my little specialty, for some reason, it's sort of like we seem to gravitate either through medical conferences or through we share bodies of work and just for the same reason to try to educate, elevate, come up with ways that people can help themselves just to get their lives back and to be the people that, that they optimally in optimal health and be who they want to be, not be so harnessed and challenged with health challenges that they can't really can live their life, productively, or what I say, find their bliss and be in their moment. And that's what we're all searching for. So I'm hoping to get you there quicker. All righty. So these are the things that we sort of can control, and I think that's important. All right, so this is a really important piece. It's going to be a little off the track, I think, from when you and I talked last, Danielle, because it's my newest body of work. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I kind of obsess and compulse on most things, which means that it's day and night researching. And so I'm always, I hear this, and I'm sure you guys do. Why me? Why now? Like all that kind of stuff. And it does go back to root cause, like people looking for that single thing. And what I'm discovering is it isn't just a single thing. We're very complex. And when years ago, different business, different life for Robby, we were developing software applications, and we discovered something. And what we discovered was a door, a key to a door. And we opened up the door, and then we realized there were 4 or 5 doors behind that. And that's the way our body is. There's many different systems, they're coordinated. And so you fix one thing and it brings something else up that needs to be tweaked a little bit. And I think that part of today is just understanding that we have control over this stuff. There's certain things that we really can make a big difference and get ourselves back to a more vital spot. So the stuff I'm going to talk about now has to do with polarity. And what I've discovered through the work of Dr. Jerry Tennant, he and I are doing some collaborations together now. Are you familiar with Dr. Jerry Tennant?
I am.
Yes?
Yes.
Did we talk about polarity, or have you interviewed him?
I think we did talk about polarity, but I have ventured down that rabbit hole myself
okay.
as well. So how about you, Terry?
No, I don't know anything about it. So it's new eyes.
Okay. All right. Well, what Dr. Tennant looks at the body and healing through as if we were an electrical circuit board. And what he discovered was that in order for a cell to be healthy, it has to have a negative 25 millivolts of charge. And when a cell is in repair, so that's when your immunity needs to be charged up, and because it's being invaded by a virus or bacteria, you need negative 50 millivolts of charge. Now, if the cell isn't charged properly, then it doesn't have the power to actually provide its functions. And in this case, many cells together make up your immune system, and so it can't fight back. Now, again, just a little bit of physics. If you imagine that every cell is like a battery and it has a positive and negative charge, and there are some broad statements I'm going to make now. Most of us have more positive charge. Our bodies are more positive and negative charge. In order for our batteries and our cells to operate optimally, they have to be actually a neutral charge, meaning as much negative as much positive. Now, if you drain a battery, like you take a AA battery and you drain it down so it has no charge, the polarity of that battery flips. So that means that the positive pole becomes negative and the negative pole becomes positive. Now, if you try to recharge a battery that's polarity has flipped, it won't hold a charge anymore. And I think that's the challenge that we have in chronic disease now, is you've got bodies like we hear about mitochondria, and that's the powerhouse of the cell. Where is that mitochondria getting its energy from? The sun. And what does it need in order for it to utilize that energy in a cogent manner that will allow the cell to operate and fight back and do all its vital functions? It needs to be properly charged. It needs to have the proper polarity. And what I'm discovering, and what really changed my whole perspective, frankly, we're now in clinic. Before we do anything, we test people's polarities. We notice that most people, their polarities are off. We flip their polarities so that they actually can hold a charge. Then we charge them up by using basically grounding techniques, bringing earth charge, bringing negative ions. into the body. And now we start doing our protocols. And what we've seen is an enhancement somewhere between 20 and 25% in terms of the body's ability to bounce back, to create vitality, and to quickly organize their systems so that the body is working in a much more unified manner. And so I think it's a really big piece. So in the world of polarity, you have what's called electron donors, and that would be the Earth. The ultimate electron donor is the Earth because it's got this negative charge. And if you just kick your shoes off and you walk on the Earth, or you hold on to something that is grounded into the Earth, which could be like, I'm a tree hugger, so I'm going there. So if you hug a palm tree or an oak tree or whatever is the tree, that's something that's rooted into the ground, you're actually going to bring that Earth charge up into your body, balance out the charge in your body, and that gives you the ability to at least have a fighting chance to fight back, particularly if you have chronic challenges. So I love the real law of attraction has to do with the actual charge of the body, and not so much the way that we're attracting people into our lives. I find. Okay, so this polarity thing is really what I believe wanted to be one of the root causes, the lack of polarity. And of course, fixing it is relatively easy and inexpensive, and we can go into some of that stuff. But all of the molecules of the body that make up every component of our body, it's all about their charges, the way that they're attracted to one another on a microscopic level, like oxygen attracts two hydrogen molecules, and that becomes H2O, right? So it's all about charge. Okay, so here's Dr. Jerry Tennant. And what this list here is important because it delves into other things. According to Dr. Jerry Tennant and his work, the reason why the body doesn't hold charge is because of infection, or because of your dental profile, if you have root canals, if you're heavy metal toxic. So these are the reasons. And so as a practitioner, you see your patient comes in and they exhibit themselves with certain kind of symptoms, but many of these symptoms we know about, right? Most people drink a lot of water, but it's not bioavailable, so they're dehydrated. So we can easily help each other by understanding that drinking bioavailable water is really important for us to be hydrated, and that dealing with your emotional backdrop is important. Again, back to body charge. If we can work on these different aspects that you see on the right here, cleaning up infection, dental profile, your toxicity, your emotions, hydration. Also, when there's a thing about scars, many of us through operations, through our lives, we've had scars. You heal, your skin heals, your tissues heal, maybe your tendons and your ligaments heal. But what about the electrical fields that have been severed by that surgery? They haven't been addressed. And so if you look at some of the Eastern medical approaches, like from the Asian bloc or from the Indian, the Ayurvedic approach, they're very conscious of the energy meridians and the energy balancing of the body. And so there are methods. We've created a few protocols ourselves to heal scars and interference fields, which I'm happy to share with you and your community whenever we find it appropriate. So these are the reasons why, for the most part, our body won't hold charge. And so that's just important to understand in the backdrop. For the most part, most of us are working or thinking about some of these things anyway, through our normal health challenges. But if we organize taking care of some of these profiles right out of the gate, it's going to help the body hold charge, which is going to help build our immune system, which is going to help us unite our systems in an integrated, functional way that's going to get us back to that vital primal platform.
Agreed.
Okay, how are we doing so far?
Good. There's so much to be said about the autonomic nervous system and sympathetic overdrive as well, right?
Right.
So I'll chime in with some questions in a little bit at the end.
Yeah,
but-
that was number 2. I didn't leave it alone for any reason, but we are very much now in a state of, it's not panic, but an anxious state, generally globally speaking, when we see that a lot, the way people are expressing themselves. Certainly our community that we're talking to today, even not knowing is stressful. When you do know it's stressful, if you don't quite have a game plan put together, that could be stressful. All of that puts you sort of at the edge of your chair, which is what's called sympathetic dominant. What we have discovered, you may already see this in clinic or in hospital, that if we can shift your autonomic nervous system and your vagal responses to a parasympathetic state, then you're going to be calmer, and it'll be much easier for you to accept any protocols, your body to really integrate it and it hold in a more sustainable way. So really, we're talking about sustainable healthcare, not just a Band-Aid now. And I know we have a very particular focus with the community, but I am talking holistically as well. So we can fix the challenge with our community today. But what do we do after that? Like, we have to stay on the game, stay in the game and stay vital. And that's what I'm hoping to express here. So I would like to now just sort of focus on my body of work, which is harnessing sun energy, full spectrum infrared. And this is probably the slide, Danielle, I think you were talking about. Okay. So I'm going to make, again, some blanket statements. What we've seen in clinic is that the sequence, the order that you do certain things in, and the way that you dose what you do could make all the difference in your outcome. So I'm going to be relating this to, I'm going to just pick one of our devices we make, which is called an infrared sauna. And so a lot of my references will be to that, but really it speaks to infrared frequencies in general. But on this slide, you're just seeing the planet Earth, and then these are all the different frequencies that the sun the array of electromagnetic frequencies that the sun delivers to the Earth every day. And from left to right, we're going from the frequencies that are the most harmful to the body to the least harmful. So gamma and X-ray, even though we use X-ray in hospital, and now it's even more sparingly because of computers, which is fantastic. I just recently had dental work done, and I couldn't believe, like, I was remembering when I was a kid that the dental hygienist was standing behind a lead shield, and I had this lead thing on me, and that weighed a ton, and I was a little kid. I thought I was going to suffocate, and now you just sit in this chair, and they just bring this little scope over, and they just flip a switch or hit a button, and in a second, my whole dental profile is a cone beam is flashed on a screen in front of me. And so even though X-rays aren't healthy for us, they have a medicinal purpose, and they give us a lot of information. And now with computers, they're used much more sparingly, so we're not exposed as much to the negative side of it. Then we're getting into now ultraviolet natural light, which is the rainbow. That's what we see. Ultraviolet rays and infrared rays, microwaves, radio waves, all these are invisible to your eye. So ultraviolet is considered the actual natural nutrient healing parts of sun energy. The infrared spectrum is the healing frequencies. So there are some damaging frequencies in ultraviolet that people hear about. People in Florida are concerned that they get too much sunlight, they're going to get skin cancer, things like that. Some of it is certainly evidence-based, but what we've seen in nature and what happens here with sunlight is if you do get overexposed to ultraviolet and you're in the sunlight for long enough, the infrared frequencies will heal all the damage that the ultraviolet rays have done for you. So if you can imagine dialing back to 8,000 to 10,000 years ago when we lived in caves and on tents in the land, right? On the land, we were out hunting all day, right? The animal kingdom, they're out in sunlight all day. So they're getting way overexposed to ultraviolet light, but they're also in sunlight long enough to get healed by the infrared frequencies. This mechanism really excited me because I was focusing on infrared. And so here I am in this genre of invisible light that is developed in nature to heal our bodies, like on so many levels. And so that was my discovery about 25 years ago plus. And we made a bunch of different devices around that. So to unpack infrared, it's broken down to 3 wavelengths: the near, the mid, and the far frequencies. For anybody tuning in, you Google infrared or any of your search engines, there's a big range between the near frequencies and the far frequencies. As a company, as a device developer and bioscientist, what I've just decided was, like, just take a page out of nature's playbook. If it's good enough for nature to deliver full spectrum, which is all 3 wavelengths in a certain proportion, then let's work with that to start with, rather than do that isolating reduction, compartmentalizing of frequencies. So I know that there's great things about near and there's great things about far. And what I have discovered in our clinic is that the body takes what it needs. And almost like dosing with vitamin C, if you take too much vitamin C, your body just expels it. Similar to these kinds of light frequencies, if you get too much of any one wavelength, the body absorbs what it needs and lets go of what it doesn't need. And that just creates a harmony or homeostasis from an energetic point of view. So as it comes to sauna protocols, so for people out there that have infrared saunas, and this is an important tool, by the way, particularly for detoxifying. Because we've noticed that what's different about infrared saunas or infrared frequencies for detoxifying is it's actually a wavelength. It's a radiant, it's a light wave. Okay, it's radiant heat, and it's a kind of wavelength that penetrates directly into the body because it harmonizes or resonates, it vibrates at the same frequency as the water inside of our bodies. So Terry, I don't know whether you realize this, but your body is probably 72% water if you drink enough of it. And Danielle, your brain is like 81% water. Your cells are about 98% water. And so even though I'm harnessing sunlight, water is a big part of the picture, because I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Gerald Pollack, who wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water. We became friends. He inspired me to make a water filtration system because he wrote in his book called The Fourth Phase of Water that there are certain frequencies of sunlight, the infrared spectrum, that will actually restructure the water inside of your body. And that improves cell communication. So if we have better cell communication, then we can actually, create a better systematic approach where our cells are working in harmony, both, helping fight off disease and pathogens, and also cleaning up some of the challenges with toxicity. So certainly if you have a leaking breast implant, you've got challenges with an exogenous frequency that's not natural, that's inside your body, that your body is going to be working hard to get out. And so we've created a system and a platform using harnessing full spectrum infrared frequencies that helps the body do what it does naturally. And you can do it in your own home at your own convenience. We create specialized protocols, as we will for your community, in terms of using sauna and infrared frequencies. And we do that because basically I believe that in the world that we're living in today, not just that whether you have a challenge with implants, but just the toxic world we're living in today, you need to have a device like this that's affordable, portable, and you can just take it with you. You can plug it in, you can use it every day. Like we get toxic every day a little bit, you can also detox a little bit through your foods and through harnessing sun energy, which if we were left to our own and we were dialing back the calendar, the years, 10,000 years ago, we'd be doing all this naturally, but we don't now in our busy lifestyles, we don't actually get in the sun during the right time of day. And this is kind of an interesting slide for that, because if you notice, Danielle, like this, the relationship of the sun to the earth is called the azimuth. And then, so sun being stationary as the earth is turning through the day, there's different frequencies that are more prominent in the atmosphere. And so, for instance, in South Florida now, between the hours of 11 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the UV spectrum is most prevalent. And then the UV spectrum starts to way down and the infrared spectrum starts to come in. And that's where you get that exchange. So you could be in the sun in the early part of the day, get overexposed to UV light, not be there in the afternoon to heal the overexposure from the early part of the day, walk home with a big sunburn, maybe have created a little bit more extra vitamin D than you would have normally. but the free radicals and other things that might have been generated, you haven't had, your body will not have had an opportunity to heal from. We've created devices like our infrared application, our sauna, that you can basically get the healing frequencies, bring it into your lifestyle whenever it fits your lifestyle, as opposed to the organic timing. Okay, so with infrared sauna, if you do it every day, you're going to get a better result. If you do it earlier in the day, you're going to get a better result. These are optimal. And I think when we talked about this last, if, as a clinician, if I had to choose for you, if I was creating a protocol for you, Terry, and I had to choose between what's optimal for you or what's practical for you, I'll always choose what's practical, because that's going to be the one that you're going to gravitate to, right? It's going to most mend in with your lifestyle, whatever that is. So even though optimally it's better to do it earlier in the morning, if, like, we had a truck driver that called us a couple of weeks ago and he said, I get up at 4, I'm not getting up at 3 to do a sauna. I get home at 6. When can let's work something out. And I created something for him. So we want to work around your busy lives, because that's the life you've chosen. And we can offer a device that you can bring a lot of nature into, balancing of nature into your life, within your own home and your scheduling. So the number of days you do it per week, the time of day is important. How much time you spend in each session, and then what temperature you have in each session. And each of those variables we basically tweak so that it fits whatever your personal goal is. Yeah. And yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I know for me personally, like with BII, the connective tissue, the muscle aches and pains, and the joint issues, right? Like I before I knew about sauna, a warm shower would help, but it didn't I'd have to take 3, 4, 5 of them a day, right? Just for pain relief, right? But now in my the way I work my sauna time is I'll do it in the morning, and I have such a drop in stiffness. For me now, it's stiffness more than pain, and I'm able to be flexible throughout the day. And as long as I keep an semblance of that, then I'm no longer stiff, right? So
sure,
there's I would hope a bunch of people listening to this, in which that, yeah, are we better post explant? Like, I'm better. I'm not all better, right? So I feel all better, and my lifestyle is, sauna. Like for me now, it's like at least 3 times a week, or right before exercise, or things like that. And everyone's going to have their own little descriptive of how they would like to use this therapy. But and it also helps me calm down, which is why I also like the ANS sympathetic overdrive number 2 on the last slide. But like it also has it's almost like a tension relief, right? Like,
oh yeah, totally.
That a little
totally.
bit, like,
yeah. Well, how does it work like that? Well, first off, I don't know if I got into this with you, but we developed a proprietary heart rate variability program here. And so we actually test to make sure that all of our devices, one thing I test in my lab is to make sure that we are shifting you to parasympathetic.
It
so
totally does.
Yeah, we're tracking your brain waves. So it isn't as detailed. It starts from your heart movement, which is connected to brain movement in terms of energy, right? But it's not the same as a 21 brain cap, like that kind of diagnostic in terms of your brain waves. But we can actually see you shifting from beta to alpha, and you can feel it as you are talking about. And it doesn't take very long. It basically takes 8 minutes for the average sized adult person to, once they're, particularly in our devices, but if you're in an infrared device, it takes a sauna, it takes about 8 minutes to get enough frequency to actually start to shift your physiology inside. And so that's why when we start, we have we generally go low and slow. It really depends on how the patient's presenting themselves. But but we just look for your body to basically tell us when, as we move along, to get you into the sauna a little bit longer and for a little bit more frequent time. But we do notice right away that it calms you down. And we do have a sleep protocol if you have a challenge for that, with that. And so people oftentimes with chronic ailments, their circadian rhythms get all messed up.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from, when we show this, we'll have a chat and then we'll have a little round table after. But
yeah,
those
yeah.
of you who have used sauna, would love to hear your experiences with it. From those who
Yeah.
don't sweat to those who sleep like a baby after, and
Right.
how long. I think it took me post-explant a good, and I think it also depends on which sauna you use too, like
a little bit.
Maybe not necessarily the light, but the temperature in which your body responds to. But it took me a good 3 months before I started to notice some of these shifts in me and in my healing process. So I'd love to hear from other people. Terry, did you use a sauna when you're?
I've never used one, ever. So this is all new to me.
Great. So hopefully we're going to inspire you so that you'll be like one of our activists, to tell us about your change, what happened for you. I like that you brought up that it took you 3 months before you felt some changes, because just oftentimes it's frustrating for both the practitioner and the patient too, because they have unrealistic expectations as to how quickly things can happen, and explant patients have a very unique profile.
Yeah.
But if you're working with like Lyme or a chronic ailment, I mean, it could take, your body could have been accumulating toxins for 10 years, and then something just kind of was a tipping point. Then you became very symptomatic, right? And so you're thinking, well, if I could just turn back the page one day and, fix that one little thing, but it doesn't really work like that. You kind of build it up, And I often, when I'm talking about this, I describe climbing the toxic mountain, you do that one step at a time, right? And so we're kind of bringing you down the toxic mountain now. It's very easy to fall going down a mountain. It's not easy to fall when you're going up the mountain. And so you can come down too fast. And so oftentimes with people with chronic challenges, we try to temper them a little bit because they start getting results and they want to do it until they can't do it anymore. And then they wind up doing it a little bit too much. And then rather than them having a good sort of decline or a healthy decline from the mountain, they wind up, kind of like overdoing it. Sometimes, like in the Lyme world, they could have what's called the detox response or a Herxheimer reaction. Yeah, a Herx reaction. And then, they're going, oh, I'm supposed to feel better, but I feel worse. And as far as I'm concerned, you should never have a Herx reaction. We can certainly show you how to do that or how to avoid that with our protocols. And I just think it's just understanding like what the science behind what we're doing, how easy it is to follow, having a realistic goal that it's not going to happen overnight, the healing process, but doing sauna every day will improve your health incrementally. And the more you do it, the greater the change. And for, it may apply to the explant community or not, I don't know. But in the Lyme community, oftentimes some of the changes are so subtle that I actually have people journal so that they can see that, I'm in pain, but I wasn't in as much pain as I was in the early part of the month. So when you just ask your regular practitioner, they'll say, are you still in pain? And you go, yeah, I am. But I'm not a 10 anymore. I'm a 5.
Yeah.
So my protocols are working. Yeah. And oftentimes journaling can bring out those subtle things, which is super important. And Terry, this goes back to that whole emotional piece, like we were talking about earlier. Like emotionally, when you're trying to get better and you're frustrated because it's not working as fast as you might hope it will work, sometimes that works against you, right? So when you start to journal, or you're working with people that keep you pumped and inspired, then you stay on the road, and then all of a sudden, boom, it starts to work, and then your bodies start to unify, or your systems start to unify, and then you actually start getting exponential healing rather than just the daily incremental stuff. And that's beautiful to watch that. And so it's there for all of you, by the way, that are just tuning in. Just stay with us. Okay, so stacking your hacks, what that for in not new English, but in old English, that basically means like what certain kinds of protocols can we do that will create a synergistic effect, or if like where 2 and 2 doesn't make 4, 2 and 2 can make 6, 8, or 10. And so I look for that because the body works that way in a systematic way. I could turn on a light in one part of my system that initiates a response somewhere else in another bodily part of my system. And now I've got 2 lights turned on that together, they create a much more vital response. So these are the things that infrared will help do. It helps potentiate or increase the absorption of nutrition. So, and it enhances your metabolism. That means we're moving more blood around. And how do we do that? Because when the infrared frequencies come into the body, it creates a resonance or a bioresonance, a actual vibration. Like I mentioned earlier, it vibrates at the same frequency as the water inside of your body. And so now these wavelengths of sunlight that are not only energizing your cells, that's your mitochondria, but it's also organizing and structuring the water so that the communication between cell to cell, water fills up all the gaps between cell to cell. It's all comprises your interstitial fluid. When that is ordered and structured, now there's like a direct link between these cells that communicate. And imagine, well, this goes back to biology 101 probably. The cells communicate almost with like letters, like we form words from an alphabet. Imagine if, we were trying to communicate, you and I, and we were using letters, but I didn't have a complete alphabet. And so when I formed my word, it wasn't complete because I was missing a letter. And so you couldn't really understand what I was saying because we weren't really speaking a common language. And that's what happens with cell communication. If they don't have all the right letters, if they're not quite organized properly, then they're not communicating. They don't communicate, they don't function, they don't methylate right. They can't get information in, they can't get nutrients in, and the cell won't be able to get rid of its toxins, and the body won't be able to get rid of those. And so this is sort of from a micro to a macro level. But infrared frequency will enhance that metabolic function, enhance cell communication. And one thing it does is it restructures the water so that the cells can communicate. By enhancing metabolism, now we've got these wavelengths of sunlight that come into the body, creating vibration, creating heat. It warms up the cell. The infrared frequencies store in your densest parts of your body, which is your organ mass or your muscle tissue. Okay, and so they vibrate there. Those are generally the most vascular parts of the body. So you warm up a muscle or an organ, it warms up the vessels around it. The vessels get warmed up, they start to dilate. If we dilate a vessel, it allows more blood flow to come through. And now we're increasing your metabolism by 15 to 20%. That brings more nutrition around, more healing, DNA and RNA, and more oxygen. And these are all primal healing platforms. And this is all done by infrared sunlight, okay? So we're improving oxygenation. We also create what's called a heat shock protein or an HSP. Heat shock proteins is a precursor of your immune system. It's like a GPS targeting system for the body. And so the body senses an invader like a virus or a bacteria, and it sends out its soldiers to try to identify who, these invaders. And so heat shock proteins are the infrared frequencies, particularly the ones that our sauna produces, will actually be the precursor for your lymphatic system and also for your body's natural immune system. So if your body is not producing heat shock proteins by itself, just by being in sauna, it will produce that response. And that's a super important one, particularly if you're fighting off invaders or getting us back to health. Redox signaling There's a guy, doctor named Dr. Samuelson, who developed a formulation that's called a SIA. It's sold as a, guys can buy it, you know, and basically redox signaling is a form of redox molecules. We start making less of them as we get older. It's another reason why we age or why people age. So by getting in sauna, we're actually creating more heat shock proteins than the body might produce naturally, which also comes from what's called a histamine response. So when the body understands that there's been an invader, it sends out these soldiers and somewhat to fight, to identify them and fight them. And so being in infrared sauna, we're just supporting that whole system by creating heat shock proteins. So you help rebalancing your terrain. The protein folding is another one. There's trillions of strands of proteins that are unformed in the body. What they need is a structured water molecule in order to fold over. Like, I don't know if you remember this when you were a kid, Terry. Did you ever get a bunch of rubber bands and make a rubber band ball and then just continue it? Yeah. Okay. So that's what protein folding is. Left the body without structured water, proteins won't form in the body. Those are the building blocks of our health, you know, make muscle and everything else. So you need structured water, so you need infrared frequency. This is again back to Gerald Pollack. You need infrared frequency to structure a water molecule in order for proteins, these strands of unstructured proteins, to actually fold over that water molecule, singlet water molecule, to properly form a protein. And so absent infrared frequencies, you won't get the proper proteins formed. So that's another thing that's really great. We've mentioned about restructuring of water, and also, of course, mitochondrial energy, and the sun or infrared frequency being another form of way of getting electrons into the body.